Hello hungry travelers, and welcome to episode 1 of Nomad Kitchen. I'm Pierce, an avid traveler and nomad myself, and today we are venturing to West Africa to cook a hotly contested dish, a dish that's dangerously delicious, sometimes dangerously spicy, and that's one of my favorite rice dishes that you can find anywhere. Of course, I'm talking about the legendary Jollof Rice. The soul of Nomad Kitchen is 3 things. Number 1, exploring the world through our kitchen. We're gonna prepare some really delicious food on this channel. Number 2, we're gonna learn the history that goes with that dish, a little cultural context while we're cooking. Number 3, we're gonna learn how to use our kitchen even with the most basic utensils like this Airbnb that I'm living in right now. This isn't gonna be a super polished Gordon Ramsay style cooking show. We're gonna learn, we're gonna cook, we're gonna eat well, and we're gonna have a great time doing it. So if you're ready to get into the meat of the episode, come along as we explore the West African staple dish, Jollof Rice. So let's start off with what Jollof Rice is. Jollof Rice, in its essence, is a one-pot rice pilaf. You're gonna have a long grain or sort of middle grain rice, depending on what sort of Jollof rice you're making, and we'll get into the differences as we go. And the rice is spiced with various flavor additives and a base. The base is gonna be tomatoes, red peppers, tomato paste, onions, ginger and garlic, and for the Nigerian version, something super spicy, which is gonna be the Scotch bonnet or habanero pepper. To our jollof rice, we also have different spices which depend on which region of Africa you're making your jollof rice from. In our jollof rice today, we're going to add curry powder, black pepper, a little bit of nutmeg, a chicken bouillon cube, a little bit of ginger powder, paprika, thyme, and 2 bay leaves. This is our spice blend. So as we do our mise en place, let me tell you a little bit about jollof rice. But first, let me show you this cool trick where if you're in a bad kitchen and you don't have a peeler, you can always take off the peel of garlic using a spoon. First up, we need to mince up our ginger and garlic to make a sort of ginger garlic paste, which you find in many different dishes. So as we break down our onion, which will for sure destroy my eyes, let's talk a little bit about the history of jollof rice and what it means to the people of West Africa, because you can find it basically everywhere in West Africa in some form. So they say the history of jollof rice starts in the Senegambia region, which is the northern part of West Africa that touches Mauritania. While Western Africa is extremely diverse and has lots of different tribes, there was one empire that stuck out, specifically in the Senegambia region, and that would be the Wolof tribe, also sometimes called the Jollof tribe or Jollof, maybe like something like the Jollof tribe. I'm not exactly sure. But if you go to Senegal today, in Senegal they speak French because it was a colony of France, but of course they also speak Wolof, which is the major language of Senegal and Gambia. All right, so our mise en place is done. We've got some minced garlic and ginger, we've got chopped onions, we've got our cut up pieces of red bell pepper, and we've got our cut up pieces of tomatoes. That's a good start. Senegal itself has a famous dish called tiboudien. Tiboudien basically translates something to like fish with rice, and it's a pretty royal dish. It's a spiced rice pilaf, very similar to the base of this, but then you're gonna add fish, sometimes you can add meat, and then you're gonna have different sorts of fried vegetables on top, including eggplant, maybe zucchini, maybe some potatoes. Basically every family, every region of Senegal and the Gambia, including Mauritania, does a different version of tiboudien. And that's the base of this dish. Obviously, the peoples of West Africa mixed a lot. There was a lot of trade going on, and this became a dish that became a staple of many West African nations because West Africa was a center for rice growing. Rice has always been a part and a staple good of the West African nations and many different kingdoms. The Wolof kingdom being one of them, the greater Mali Empire, which conquered the majority of Western Africa and the Sahara region, being another. Let's get to blending while we talk about the next part. The next step of this dish is going to be to blend the base of our sauce, which is going to include our tomatoes, our red bell peppers, and our spicy habanero pepper, habanero Scotch bonnet pepper. So this area of Africa, West Africa, was a place of empires and kingdoms, both from Africans and both from colonial Europeans. This was also a part of Africa that was a big part of the transatlantic slave trade, which means that many of the people that ended up in Brazil, the Caribbean, and the United States came of this West African descent, specifically from the areas of Senegambia, Liberia, Sierra Leone, and other places on the Gold Coast coastal region. That means that modern jollof rice is a product of that transatlantic slave trade, mostly because many of the ingredients you find in jollof rice, it could be the Scotch bonnet or habanero pepper, traditionally from the Americas, the use of tomatoes, traditionally from the Americas, became sort of the forefront of many of the cuisine and dishes that we see in the United States and in the Caribbean, such as red rice, which you find in the southern part of the United States, as well as jambalaya, which is very similar to the jollof rice version from Liberia that you find today. Many of the dishes that we enjoy today and that embody the spirit of national cuisine abroad are the product of the movement of people, sometimes willingly, sometimes unwillingly, the movement of goods from different continents, and the general sharing of knowledge and oral tradition that's passed down from generation to generation. To a pot, we're gonna add some oil. Now, the thing that I found with the jollof rice recipes that I found online is that each one of them has a different idea of how to start the dish. This dish that I found is going to start with the onions that we cut up earlier, brown them off, and then add in, So I will say that every jollof rice recipe that I found had conflicting information on how they wanted to start the dish. Everything did agree that we definitely needed this red paste, but sometimes you added the onions in the paste, sometimes you fried them off before. This recipe had me frying them off before, then going in with the ginger garlic, then sauteing down that red paste. What's interesting about jollof rice is that no one country can agree on exactly how it's made, what ingredients should be in there, but the final products, it doesn't matter if you're in Mali, you're in Nigeria, or you're in Senegal and you're cooking traditional tiboudien, it's going to be very similar, your final product. The flavors that you find in the rice, the type of rice they use, whether it's served with meat or not with meat, those all seem to change depending on what you're doing, but the generalized red rice thing, you're gonna find that in each country equally. If you ever wanna make something super delicious, doesn't matter what you're cooking, the combination of onions, garlic, and ginger gonna fill your kitchen with crazy good smells, and your end result is gonna be really good. You can see this combination all over the world, but specifically in India, in China, and in West Africa. 3 totally different cuisines, all using the same building blocks to make delicious, flavorful things. Once our onions, garlic, and ginger have gotten all nice and toasty, we are gonna go in with our spice blend. You always wanna toast spices in some oil to really brighten them up and give it a nice flavor, really open it up. And then we're gonna go in with 2 tablespoons of tomato paste. That's gonna be a nice base and add richness to our final product, jollof rice. Now that our spices have had a chance to open up a little bit, we're gonna go in with our tomato, red bell pepper, and chili sauce. And we're gonna simmer this until it tightens up. This is also the moment where we're going to add in our chicken bouillon cube to give it some salt, and that's also a very common thing you're gonna find in West Africa. Sometimes they call it a Maggi cube, and in almost every African dish that I've found, West African specifically, they are tossing in the old Maggi cube. We're gonna get some really vibrant flavors out of this when we let it cook down. You're gonna get that sweetness from the tomatoes. It's gonna really round out the flavor, including that red bell pepper. So while our tomato base is bubbling away, simmering, getting that beautiful flavor, I wanna tell you why jollof rice is a bit of a controversial dish. No, it doesn't use some sort of controversial ingredient. The deal is that all these countries think that their jollof rice is better than the others. But there's 2 countries in particular that both basically have jollof rice titled jollof rice is their national dish, and both countries have a big disagreement on which one is better and which one was the first. These nations are, of course, Nigeria and Ghana. The basic difference from what I've read online is that the Nigerian jollof rice, number 1, is spicier, and number 2 includes red bell peppers. The Ghanaian version is a little bit more relaxed. It uses a little bit more sweet spices, like sometimes you can find recipes with star anise. Oftentimes you don't find curry powder in the Ghanaian version. The Ghanaian version is much more of a background dish to be served with grilled meats, maybe some fried plantains, but really to be a full dish. The Nigerian version seems to be like the main dish. It should be spicy, it should be strong, it should punch you in the face. Of course, you can have roasted chicken or something with it. The Nigerians also have something called party rice, which is like a massive batch of jollof rice with particular flavor additives for a wedding or for a other big event, an anniversary, maybe someone's having a birthday, something like that. Also, the Ghanaians typically use a long grain jasmine rice. The Nigerians typically use a parboiled mid-grain rice, so the texture is gonna be a little different. Any place you're eating these spice rices in West Africa, you're gonna see this difference. All of them making good stuff, all of them great, but the question is, who is correct, and it's not for me to answer. We've cooked our base for about 10 minutes. We're gonna go in with our bay leaves, boom. And then we are going to go in with our rice. Now the rice that you use is up to you, but the important part is to make sure that you wash it thoroughly to get rid of all the starch. If the starch is there, it's gonna clump up and it's just not gonna be as good as you want. If it's got no starch, it's gonna be nice and loose, which is what we're looking for. So let's go in with our rice. We're gonna give it a nice mix so everything can get to know each other a little bit. And then we are going to finish this with some water so it can steam away gently over the next 20 minutes and come together beautifully. I'm gonna move this to the back burner where I can have a little bit extra control over the heat. We're gonna put this on simmer. We're gonna make sure to cover it up just like that and let it rip. Our rice now is about 80% of the way done. And what I've seen in many different recipes was that the Nigerians like to add in a lump of butter to the top. Other Francophone countries, specifically like Niger and Burkina Faso, they also call this dish riz gras, which means fat rice. And I feel like the butter has something to do with that. This would also be a great time to remove your bay leaves. And lastly, what I've seen in some Nigerian recipes, certainly not in all of them, is that sometimes they like to put some raw onions on the top for a little crunch and a little spice, and also some more tomatoes, to which you're gonna let them steam and break down a little bit, get to know the rice, and so they're not so raw at the end of it. At this juncture, your rice is almost done. What you're gonna wanna do is just cover it up and let it sit for about 10 more minutes to make sure that all the rice is fully cooked and that the vegetables that you just put in break down a little bit. And here we are. Nigerian style jollof rice. Do a little cilantro garnish on the top. And there you have it. This is my first time cooking jollof rice. I'm not a chef, I'm just a guy who likes to cook, so if you think this is on the money, let me know. If you think this looks terrible, also let me know in the comments. The rice is good. It's a little spicy. You definitely get a hint of that Scotch bonnet. It's got a nice background of that tomato, red bell pepper flavor. Got the onions, you can definitely get the ginger. It's not overly spiced. It could definitely be spicier, but in general, the flavor's nice. I could see how it could go really well with some chicken, some grilled meat. If you're a vegetarian or vegan, you could probably just put some eggs on here if you're vegetarian. And if you're vegan, like this is pretty good with some vegetables, roasted vegetables, this would go really, really well. So that's gonna do it for me today. Thank you for watching episode 1 of Nomad Kitchen. I'm gonna be trying to do one of these episodes every week. We're gonna explore the world through this tiny kitchen, and I hope you join me along for the ride. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next one. Woo!